and fall, and it could be face to face, became almost a trigger because people are so heightened. They're so focused on what's this lack of control that they've had in their life, that anything about it is going to be a trigger. And just because I used the word normal, that got sometimes interpreted by others interesting, but I let it all go because I found it's truly fascinating that people there was reactions going on. And I wouldn't say that they were flooded reactions by any means.
I read a few of them.
Reactionary, but it was
reactionary.
Very
and
much.
You could argue whether it's flooded or not, but if you're reactionary without a neutral base to seek understanding, then you're bordering on a who is right approach. Yeah. And it didn't take long before it turned negative.
Well, I think people still feel ambiguous because of 55 pages of here's all these measures you have to do. But for me, it was just like the fact that the first few pages were like, it is not good for children to be at home, especially those in poverty, right, and those that are marginalized, that we are harming children. And I was like, thank you. That was it.
Well said. Okay, so we've got trigger, reaction, consequence. We discovered the trigger. Let's go over to the reaction. A reaction is a subconscious sabotaging behavior to justify a false narrative.
I already read this.
You did? No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Oh, then I got so caught up in your story. Consequence, baby.
No, but see, that whole Facebook posting was about interesting how reactions come out.
And it's okay to be frustrated. I don't want to come off as rigid, right?
Right.
It's okay to be frustrated, but be mindful when you allow that to dictate your life.
And when you go into discourse, even on social media, always have at the front of your mind seeking to understand.
Well, my advice, no one's asking it, but it's my show, so my advice would be don't go into discourse on social media.
Well, it happens, right? It's going to happen.
I'm just saying,
things.
But people are going to read in the way they want, and there are trolls out there who have the anonymous account who want to sabotage because that's how they live. That's their drug of choice. And I rarely have seen dialogue going on in those forums, and I've seen some really profound comments made. But someone always has to take the profundity and make it some sort of an attack, and it actually becomes a personal attack. As soon as it goes personal, you know that they've lost control.
Yeah, and that didn't happen in this case. But.
Okay, consequence, it's a temporary relief of pain. It's imperceptible to the individual because the pain continues. It's very temporary. It's an imbalance of the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems.
So which one gets engaged usually and flooded?
Well, I don't know if I have this right, but this is how I understand it. Fight or flight is the overstimulation of the sympathetic.
But then there's
the freeze and faint.
Yeah, freeze and faint.
And that's the parasympathetic.
And I would say that happens a lot, actually. Yeah. People feel paralyzed. And I think they have felt paralyzed emotionally.
That's why it's the 4Fs, right?
Quarantine.
Fight, flight, freeze, and faint. Okay, so now we're back to Bobby. Let's address Bobby as we wrap this up.
Okay.
He's got two approaches.
Yeah.
He can process rationally or he can process irrationally. He thought he was rational, but he had this huge anxious feeling that Brenda may not be interested in him anymore because that was his false narrative. So from a cognitive position, let's go over the facts and only the facts. This means that we're not going to create any biased narrative that fill in the gaps where there are unknowns. And that's what happens in a lot of this.
What do we call this when we just retell the story?
Fact, story, right?
Yeah,
so just the facts.
Okay. Bobby and Brenda had been dating for 13 months.
That's a fact. You can't argue it. Neither party would argue it.
Yep. Brenda went to the university out of state 3 months ago.
Fact.
They were in frequent contact while she was away.
Both phone, very few phone, but mostly texting, occasional posts.
There were no indications that she was dating one at the university. She drove home for Christmas break and shared her excitement to see Bobby again. She arrived home safely about the time she indicated. Bobby nosed her car to verify she was home.
So from this point on, Bobby took a biased pathway that was filled with his false narratives. So he isolated himself, didn't eat dinner, went to his room.
So he's flooded.
He produced electrochemicals, his opiates, to medicate his feelings that were driven by the false narratives, the shadows. And he doesn't notice that he's doing it. So he continues to feel lousy. Now, for what it's worth, and those of you who've done this know.
Okay. I want to separate a second. You say he continues to feel lousy, but those opiates, in a sense, are, we say that they reduce or a temporary relief of pain. How are they a temporary relief of pain if he's feeling lousy?
Because he would feel even worse if he didn't. We do it because we're reaching out. Okay, how does alcohol?
So the behaviors are an indication
of the fact, right?
Yeah.
When people, they use the word alcohol as liquid courage, right? So in other words, they're saying, I don't have sufficient emotional intelligence to get through the night, so I'm going to juice up. But tomorrow they feel terrible.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
I just wanted to separate that out.
Yeah. Okay, let's go over his internal narratives.
Brenda arrived home on time and doesn't want to see me. So this is how he's twisted it, the facts, right? She should have contacted me already or immediately. She's probably seeing someone else. She doesn't like me anymore. I'm not good enough to be her boyfriend. I'm not worthy to be her boyfriend. I'm not lovable.
Brutal.
I would have just like, okay, what have you been doing the last 3 months that makes you feel this way while you guys have been distanced?
Okay, fair question. And then you have to ask yourself, why would he think that when they've been talking all along? She's never indicated she's dated anyone else. She didn't say she would call him at 1. She simply said, I'll be home about this time. But he knows it's a long drive.
Now, why is he really feeling so sorry for himself?
So, and this is a holding pattern real quick.
There's so many things that can come.
But why did I isolate? Why did I get angry at X? Why did I get angry at Y? Why does that frustrate me? Why does the news put me into a tizzy?
So usually and most likely, these kinds of questions are answered through food, family of origin dysfunction.
Right.
Most often.
Right. It's a petri dish of dysfunctional behavior anytime you get together with your family. But are you recognizing it that way? Do you spend any time to find out where your behaviors are coming from? Have you processed the things that have happened to you in your life? Because if you haven't, and by the way, just talking about it is not processing it. It takes more than just a conversation, because normally that moves into venting and looping. So every false narrative, every single one of these stories are prediction errors.
Mm-hmm.
And that ushered Bobby from a trigger to a flooded. So he went trigger, reaction, flood.
Right.
And that's an addiction-laden journey. And it's going to get worse over time. So if they get married, it could be a disaster. So his subconscious took charge of the steering wheel of emotions and behavior.
Okay, let's assume Bobby does marry Brenda. Imagine what the relationship will look like every time she fails to follow whatever his immaculate perception is. Like if she comes home late or whatever. Or how he wants her to behave. He will constantly isolate. And with children, that's a mess. He will pass on the anxiety-filled energy to the next generation and compromise their ability, to deepen their relationship with other people.
So what makes this story kind of interesting is later that evening, Bobby's in his room sulking, and Brenda calls him and wishes him Merry Christmas. It caught him off guard.
Yeah, he was taken back, and he asked her how she was doing.
Yeah. And
she said, great. And she just woke up from a 3-hour nap after driving 16 hours straight and was excited to see him now.
Now, we'll get this in, we'll cover the rest of the story in the next segment. She invites him over to meet her grandparents, right?
Right.
So the idea is, notice that there's so much going on that a neutral approach could have alleviated.
And so I'm just laughing and smiling to myself. This invisible nap that he doesn't know about is what's caused him all this anxiety. What invisible benign things cause us anxiety that's so unnecessary? That if we can just step back and take a look at cues with a rational mind rather than triggers with an irrational mind that lead us to flooded, what responses, and we'll do this next time, could Bobby have done? So
here's something you could practice. Remember, the trigger buster process is the 3 touch points: spiritual, physical, and emotional. 448, do something, an activity, push up, sit up, take a walk, go get a drink of water, and reach out and touch someone. But
it makes me kind of laugh inside, because how many of us have been impatient about the stupidest thing, and it does to us what Bobby's experienced.
Yes, and that's what I was going to tell you. I practice on the freeway now.
How many of us have a goal? I want to be more patient in life. Well, just saying that is going to do diddly.
Right.
And so you have to try these 3 touches and move yourself out of the, I can't take this, and I can't wait, I can't take it, to a positive response.
So I've been practicing this on the freeway.
Okay.
When someone does something that I think is irrational on the freeway, or they block traffic or whatever, I go through the process of asking, what's going on in the car right now? What don't they know? What's happening? And inevitably, after I see what's going on, I can go by and assess it. I go, oh, that makes sense. I get it. Because I've been doing that before. I've done what they did.
Yeah, how many people have a body reaction over a traffic jam?
Over someone cutting them off, not putting a blinker on, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thanks so much for listening. We're out of time. Just as a reminder, in the next segment, we're going to unzip this a little bit more, and we're going to actually move into other options that Bobby could have done. So between now and then, what could he have done? And then we're going to move into expectations A and expectation B.
I love this.
And we're going to use an illustration of where I actually did something right for a change. So it'd be nice to say something I did good on the show. All right, guys, thanks for listening. See you in the next one.
Doubt is a broken record that plays inside my head. I try to turn it down, but I can't quite drown it out. I'm tortured every day, these never-ending worries.